Because artists are businesses. We're not just artists. Artists shouldn't have managers. Artists should have CEOs. That's how I feel. I didn't put no thought in that. You know, so there's a lot of people that's gonna have a problem with that statement. I'm gonna say how I feel. So that means, okay, how many kids are going to business school right now? Wharton, Harvard. You think they like, let's take somebody, Travis Scott, right? They probably listen to his music. Uzi, somebody like that, right? How many Uzis and Travis Scotts are there? And how many business people are there, right? I'm gonna think it's probably less Travis Scotts and Uzis than there are business people. So wouldn't you think a Travis Scott would deserve the same amount of employees as Dropbox in his first year? So that someday he can IPO for 10 billion like my friend Drew just did with Dropbox. But with artistry and artists, what's the point where you IPO? Everyone wanna talk to me about getting out. I'm out. This to get out.
You're listening to The Millennial Made Trillionaire, where we break down the influence millennials have in digitally transforming today's direct-to-consumer business strategies and highlight how this transformation will lead to more companies successfully obtaining the new trillion-dollar market cap. I'm your host, Anthony Mbunaway, data scientist and partner development manager at Microsoft. Let's get right into it. So today's episode is probably one of my favorites, and the reason why is because we're speaking on my favorite artist, businessman, even you can identify him as a mogul, but he identifies himself as the Christian billionaire artist, the one and only Kanye West. And this happened by a sit down with his former head of business development, former general counsel, Kenneth, who now leads as the COO of Roth, a high luxury fashion brand out of LA. Within our discussion, we sat down and we discussed how can artists go direct to consumer, how creators can be able to build an infrastructure around them to be able to establish a connection with their end customers and sell direct without working through the traditional channels of retail. This episode is full of great insight and great information for designers, artists, and anyone who has a product or an idea and sell their product direct to their end customer. So check this episode out. We actually made a video of this episode and recorded it live. So you can go to millennialmadetrillionaire.com and check out the video of this episode, or you could go to youtube.com and type in Millennial Made Trillionaire and watch the full episode. We also broke it down into multiple parts as well for easy consumption. But let me know what you think. You can actually pull the cliff notes. So rather than listening to me brag about how cool this episode is, let's get right into it.
Well, Kenneth, Anand, we are finally kicking off, man. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, for sure.
For everyone out there, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kenneth Anand. I am a fashion, streetwear, and sneaker consultant. I spent my last 2.5 years at the Yeezy brand working for Kanye West and his fashion label, first in a legal capacity as general counsel of Yeezy apparel, and then as head of business development. And, before that, I'd practiced law for 15 years with fashion clients, entertainment, business, which really prepped me for my work at Yeezy. And I'm happy to be here.
We really want to give some tidbits to designers that are looking to go direct to consumer within the future.
Sure.
So I guess let's start off with my first question, actually. Mm-hmm. So how was it working for today's Steve Jobs?
Yeah, so first of all, probably the most inspiring and motivated time of my professional career was at Yeezy. I think it's pretty easy to understand why. I think he inspires so many people in day-to-day life through his music, through his design, through his general ethos. But for me to see it from an insider's perspective and the business behind it was phenomenal. And I was coming from a law career, which is very time intensive. It wasn't something that I was unfamiliar with, working hard, taking the bar and then practicing law all the way from a junior associate perspective all the way until a senior partner. So, making that transition was not as daunting as it might otherwise be. But I knew that when I set foot in the business of Yeezy, I had to quickly scale up my knowledge on the business aspects of things and use my legal skills to contribute to the brand in the ways that I knew how. And that morphed over time. So, super inspiring. I mean, there's no one that's doing more, I feel like, in art, culture, design than Kanye West. So, it was dope.
And it's amazing because I don't think any lawyer really saw or sees that trajectory to the position that you found yourself in.
Yeah.
Give us, understanding of how you got there.
Sure.
Is it something that from a young age you always aspire to be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, my career has really come full circle in many ways. When I was young, like in middle school and high school, I was really into hip hop music. I was really into hip hop culture, hip hop fashion, and I wanted to.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey.
Okay.
Just outside of the city. In fact, my parents met at NYU.
Oh, wow.
Moved out to Montclair to raise us because it was, cost prohibitive to raise us here in the city. They were two teachers and raised us in Montclair. And then when the nest emptied, they moved back. But throughout my, middle school and high school years, all I wanted to do was be a music producer. I was chopping up samples and like freestyling with my friends, and I loved it. I fell in love with the culture. And so, I went to college thinking, number one, I would get a college degree, but number two, I would continue producing and trying to make it in the music business. So in college, I had a band that I produced for, and we used to play at frat parties. And
what was the name of the band?
It was called 200 Proof.
200 Proof, there we go.
Yeah, which is a slight nod to alcohol abuse. That's what college kids did at the time. So it resonated. Learned the inside of a music studio. I took classes on audio engineering. I actually got a dual degree in music and computers along with a, just general communications major.
Wow.
And so when I graduated, my parents both having their PhDs, they were like, what's next?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I just graduated. Like, give me a chance to figure it out. And so I moved back in with them, and I started taking meetings in the city to, with record labels. And I realized how difficult it was to break into that business, even with the experience that I had. And then even if you broke into the business, how grimy it was as an artist, and, how it really was set up to take advantage of artists and creative people.
So automatically, after college, you wanted to focus in the arts?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. And I grew up in a creative household. My brother's a painter. He went to RISD, and I just have like a bleeding heart for creatives. And so after struggling to make it in the music business and having some minor success, I realized that my path and my strength was in supporting creatives like my brother, like other people like myself who were struggling in the business. And so I enrolled in law school, and I went to Brooklyn Law School to pursue a career in law. And, I remember just showing up the first day of school and like looking around, and just my personal aesthetic was much different from the people that I was in class with.
Yeah.
I was just this, middle-class kid that loved hip-hop, and I was thrown in a very corporate and very homogenous world. Yeah. So I showed up the first day of school wearing like, a tracksuit, a powder blue, velour tracksuit. And I looked around, I was like, well, this isn't gonna fly for law school.
Yeah.
So I had to change up a little bit and
assimilate.
Yeah, and I think that really prepared me for the corporate world and going into a law firm, and I feel comfortable, just as comfortable wearing a suit today as I do, wearing sweats and sneakers. I prefer to wear sneakers and sweats, but I understand that there's roles for both, and if I'm gonna be a boss in any industry, it's like you gotta know how to move and shake.
Yeah.
So that trajectory from law school into passing the bar and then going to get a traditional job at a law firm, which I did. I practiced employment litigation first. I was a young associate at some very well-known employment law firms in the city, and I did harassment, discrimination, employment contracts, executive contracts, all of the things that really you need to know from an HR legal perspective, which I didn't even know, but later on would become so valuable when I got to a company like Yeezy. So I did that. Then in '09, I started my own law firm, and I branched out and started focusing on employment clients, entertainment clients, intellectual property clients. My wife was an intellectual property attorney. She's a fashion lawyer. She actually helped teach me the things that I needed to know to bring in those clients and actually service them the right way. You know, the growth just kept going and going to more of a generalist perspective for me. And what I mean by that is a lawyer who knows how to handle any legal matter for their business clients. And if you can't handle it personally, you can refer it to other people in the firm that you're in. But you are the point contact for all of your clients' needs. And so that sort of really started helping me get the growth to be like, oh, well, maybe I can go work for a company. You know, and I started toying around with the idea, like I had practiced law for maybe 13, 14 years when I was like, what's next for me? You know, like I'm 38, I'm about to turn 39, I'm about to go into my 40s. And, you know, I have this wealth of knowledge, and then I have my passions, you know, like I have the things that excite me the most, and I have my clients that do the things that really I'm passionate about, like sneakers, fashion, music. And how do I mold a career for myself that's like, I'm doing what I'm good at, but I'm also working in a space that ignites my passion and my excitement. And so, yeah, I just started focusing on those clients that were in those spaces for me. And sure enough, one day I got a call from a client of mine who was like, you know, Kanye wants to hire me as one of his executives, and would you help me negotiate that deal? And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. And so, you know, went back and forth negotiating that deal for him. And then, you know, he went to work there, and I was like, great, you know, I'm excited for him, but how do I get in there? You know, like how do I at least get into that Kanye stratosphere? Because I love, like as a fan, like I just wanted to be a part of it. And he reached out to me, you know, a few months later and said, you know, we have a lot of legal work that we need done, and can you help out with that? And I said, absolutely. And I started looking at, you know, how I could help and what their needs were. And I threw a Hail Mary out there, and I was like, you know, I could do this work for you here at my law firm, and I could save you money on what, you know, maybe you're being charged currently, or you could just hire me and I'll come do everything legally for the company. And you know, it was one of those things where it was like, there's no harm in asking, right? Like the worst thing they'll say is, nah, like we don't have that role for you. And I knew they didn't have it because I just knew that the way the company was set up. And I think I just like timing wise hit it at the right time because Yeezy was growing so fast.
What year was this?
This was 2017, early 2017. And they were just in between seasons 4 and season 5. And I was like, you know, let's see what happens. And they were growing so fast and they had so many legal needs and operational needs, you know, it made sense. And so, you know, 2 weeks later I had the job. I flew out to LA and I got to work, you know. So that's basically a quick overview of how I landed, you know,
it's
at that
perfect
job.
because it's interesting, and I would love to know, how does it differ from owning your own firm to practicing inside of a corporation like Yeezy?
Yeah, so it's very different. Obviously, number one, instead of having a multitude of clients that you got to take care of, I had one, right? So in some sense, the job got easier because I didn't have to focus on, you know, this company needs this thing done, or I have to be in court for this company today, or, you know, I have to negotiate a deal with it, like just all over the place. And that's really the skill of a partner who can manage multiple clients and make sure every one of them feels like they're being taken care of. This was, I have to focus on one client. But when your client's Kanye West, like, you know, there's a lot to be done. And like, this is a guy that knew that he was going to explode and was prepping his company for that explosion. So, you know, there were some things that were easier as a partner in a law firm and some things that were easier at Yeezy. Like I didn't have to bill my time anymore. That's something that partners do. And it's really annoying. I was never really great at it. And then like just handling the day-to-day of a growing fashion company and all the different personalities and lines of business. But as I say, like 15 years practicing law in New York City, like that'll prepare you for some serious work. So
It'll prepare you for Kanye.
Yeah. I don't know if anything can prepare you for Kanye, but but I felt like I was ready. You know?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I can see that.
And I've said this before, like the hardest thing for me showing up on day one was like not worrying about whether I could do the work, but like what to wear to work. Yeah. Yeah, so I obsessed about that for a long time.
No, I mean, at the end of the day, at least it wasn't about a tie. At least it was a shoe.
Yeah,
But,
that's right. That's right.
So when I think of a general counsel, I think of a CEO that touches every facet of the business, whether it be engineering, design, marketing, sales, and the gamut keeps on going, right?
Yeah.
So HR.
Yeah.
So within that role, was that your day-to-day at Yeezy?
Yeah, very much so. And like, Yeezy was still growing, so we didn't have every little role filled, so there were times where you had to, just as any startup might, and it's weird to think about Yeezy as a startup because, Kanye had an infrastructure and a vision that like most startups don't have, like doors opening for just anything you would imagine being possible, we could make it happen. But at least in the day-to-day of the business, there would be a number of things that I would have to work on. And I can't get into detail about too much of it, but, general counsel really has to know what every aspect of the business is doing. And if you don't, you're exposing the company to potential liability. So if your designers are making things that infringe upon other people's intellectual property, if your manufacturers are making things that maybe not be in compliance with certain regulations, if your own intellectual property is not buttoned up, if your employees are not given the right agreements, if they're not compliant with wage and hour laws, whatever it is, you have to have your hand in almost everything. And that's the role of a general counsel, is really to understand the business. And the weird thing for me was before I even got to Yeezy, I felt like I knew the business because as a fan, as like a sneakerhead, like I knew everything. Like I knew when the drops were coming out, like I knew what releases were to look forward to. I knew like what patterns were on our clothing, like what graphics we had used. So like walking in, the designers were like, bro, like you are like the perfect guy for this, And it was weird for them because they're looking at a lawyer like, oh, this is going to be a stuffy guy. But this was what I was built for. I really felt like that. And so the transition was a lot easier as opposed to going into a company that maybe was in a different vertical that I was not so knowledgeable about. Like, I don't know, pharmaceuticals, right? Like that's just not my thing, So, and I may have represented some over the years in a small capacity, but I was all in. Like I was a streetwear guy from day one. So like this just made sense.
So when I think of Yeezy, I think of like the ultimate direct-to-consumer brand, company. But like you said, doors are opening really easily for the brand as you guys maneuvered. But one thing Kanye identified when he was first trying to get this thing started, or at least removing himself from Nike to Adidas, is that as a celebrity, he gets taxed. Like everyone's coming at him, trying to get the most out of him. But when he entered into Adidas, it seemed like he found a family, found a home for the Yeezy brand, which from a direct-to-consumer model, working through Adidas, I was wondering, is Yeezy structured as a separate company, as a brand?
Sure. So I can't really speak to the entity and how it was structured, because there's, just confidences there that I can't speak to. And, I was the guy that wrote our NDA. So it would be pretty bad if I was going into those details. But what I can say generally is like typically the way a company would be set up that would work with a brand like Adidas is you would either have a separate entity and you would license your intellectual property to Adidas, like you would license your mark like Yeezy or Assad or whatever it is, you would license that mark to Nike, to Adidas, or you would have a brand underneath the umbrella of Nike and Adidas, and they would take care of all that for you. Obviously, you would have a bit more leverage if you did the former setup than the latter, because you would have more control over your IP, you would have more control over your company and your setup and the day-to-day operations. But there's all different forms and shapes of a licensing agreement, of a brand endorsement agreement. So there's really no one cookie cutter model. And I think what we're seeing today and what's really important for designers to know is that, depending on your brand and your ethos and your aesthetic and how you set it up, there's really ways that you can skin this cat to make the best endorsement deal for you if you have that leverage, right? Obviously, Kanye came in with a tremendous amount of leverage and cachet, like coming from Nike and being able to say, no, I'm gonna walk away from this to go to somewhere where I think it can be the right fit for me. Not every designer has that, ability, but there's just so many ways, and I think designers are inherently creative. They need to be thinking about how they do their partnerships creatively.
No, I totally agree. And that really speaks to the heart of the conversation today around how designers can start moving into a business-minded forefront and thinking direct to consumer.
Yeah.
When we talk about the $1 trillion millennial, when we talk about the $1 trillion millennial, I think direct to consumer is the fastest way for a retail brand to get there.
Sure.
So when we look at the market opportunity for the sneaker culture or the sneaker business, or even from a retail streetwear perspective, what would you say the market opportunity is for a brand similar to Yeezy?
Yeah, so there's obviously tremendous market opportunity. Like, we've seen a shift in the way people consume goods, in the last 10 to 20 years in such a massive way. Like, Yeezy in itself was able to reach its consumer because of its following, because of Kanye's, authenticity and his really, his aesthetic. He's able to really engage his customers, right? So direct to consumer made sense. It's like, why should I pay wholesale, a percentage to my wholesalers or to my distributors when I can just reach my people on my own? It's the same thing that a poppin' artist might feel like about their mixtape versus going to a record label, right? Like, you might be the Chance the Rapper of fashion, right? So you might be able to say, look, I don't need these record labels. I can go directly to my fans because I already have that engagement. They believe in me. I speak to them. I have a niche that fills, a void in whatever consumers want, right? So, like, that's happening in fashion. That's happening with sneakers. That's happening everywhere, really. I mean, in photography, like Instagram, there's so many ways that you can reach your consumers directly. So it's taking the need of the middleman out, which is empowering the people selling. It's empowering the designers, and it's giving them more opportunity. So, Yeezy just did what it could do best, which was like reach its people. Kanye had a following before he even went to Nike, and when people were like, oh man, like, everything this dude does is authentic, so I know his sneakers are gonna be crazy, right? And then you release them and it's like, oh my gosh, like, I've never seen anything like this. That's the ability of a true creative. It's like, Elon Musk does that. Like, there's just so many ways. Like, they're taking new ways and disrupting and reaching their consumers like never before. So now's the time. Like, DTC is great. The problem is that, like, you got to reach your audience. So record labels are doing this. They're making their artists go and find their following on YouTube, on Instagram, and then they're taking the cream of the crop, not necessarily the most talented, but those who have the most followers, and they're like, yeah, we'll give you a deal. Mm-hmm. We'll give you an advance, but they've already done all the work, So, like, if you can stick it out as a young designer, and if you can say, all right, I might not get that advance, but there might be a slow and steady path to my continuing to grow my brand on my own, you'll have a lot more leverage, like Kanye did when he walked into Adidas. So,
but the issue here, you correlated that to, like, music, in a lot of the forms of art, but within the fashion industry, the law hasn't caught up for you to be able to protect your IP. And we'll get into that later on, but it's interesting to me. It's very similar from within the music realm, within other industries, but it seems like fashion is still dated from the U.S. perspective on the legalities around it.
Yeah, and I think, the IP laws are somewhat broadening to cover more protection for designers. The problem is that they're protecting the huge conglomerates that have released, a multitude of products that look the same, so a young designer who has something that's really hot and really novel cannot get the same protection as, like, Nike that owns Converse and has a historical and iconic silhouette like the Converse All-Star. Like, there's recent laws that have protected that silhouette in ways like never before, right? So, like, people used to come out with, like, a fake Chuck Taylor, like, I don't know,
even Bape. If you look at it, they took the Air Force One and just changed the check.
Exactly. So we're seeing broadened protection for those kinds of trade dress or like silhouettes and like, other unmistakable iconic looks, like the red bottom on a Louboutin shoe, things like that. But the young designers who haven't proven themselves, that are coming out with the hottest ideas that these big brands are copying, they have no protection. And it's even in the luxury houses that are coming out with like haute couture looks and like things that are so wild and really blur the line between a utilitarian aspect of just like a piece of clothing and like art, right? And things that should be protected by intellectual property laws. There's nothing like that yet. And it's a topic actually that's pretty near and dear to my heart, because my wife is a fashion attorney, and when she graduated law school, she wrote an article called Style Piracy Revisited, and she was proposing that designers should have some limited time frame, like maybe 6 months or a year, like the lifespan of a collection in the fashion world, of a limited protection to say, this is what I'm doing that's so new. Give me some time to like let my design breathe and make some money, and then you can copy it.
Yeah.
Instead of the fast fashion model, which is like Kanye releases a dope Yeezy sweatshirt, and then whoever, I don't want to name names, but like whoever will have it on the shelves tomorrow, or will have it on their website. And that's frustrating, because like I spent all this time, not me, but I, the designer, spent all this time, coming up with this amazing new look, and the next day it's gone and somebody else can buy it for the, a quarter of the price. And it's frustrating. So like, I do think intellectual property laws in the United States needs to catch up with that a little bit, because there's so much innovation there. Will it? I don't know, because the United States still looks at a piece of clothing as just a garment.
Yeah.
They don't look at it the same way we do. Like your plaid pants, which are dope and, match with your inertia V2s. Like, there's something about that. Like, wouldn't it be dope if you could protect this look for a hot minute? Like, no one else.
Yeah, and when you bring up Chance the Rapper, as one of the staples of going independent within the music industry, I start going back and thinking within the fashion realm, how can a fashion or designer go independent? Is that them protecting their IP?
Yeah.
And what is the equity of that IP?
I think a designer's IP is really their minds, right? The creative mind that they have. I think that's the way they should look at it. Like Kanye was never really threatened by people coming in and copying it, because he knew he'd create more amazing inventions, ideas, designs. And that's for anybody, right? So like, why would an artist give their mixtape to the public for free? Because they want the people to have it. It's like art, right? Like, give it away. And the money will come, right? Because if you know that in your heart that you're talented and that you can do this day in and day out, it's what you were born for, then you're not threatened by somebody copying it, because you will go back to the lab and come up with something, the next thing, right? So I think, the Chances of the world, the Kanyes that don't put their labels on things, that just say like, you'll know a Yeezy piece when you see it. They're really taking a risk because they're comfortable within themselves. Like, they're comfortable with their own creativity, and they know that the next thing they'll do will be even bigger. So when Chance dropped 2 mixtapes, no label, and then Apple came to him and said, we want you to do coloring book, and I keep talking about Chance because it's like the perfect model for a designer. It's like, like, put your stuff out there and get known, and then make H&M come to you, make Uniqlo come to you, make, Tommy Hilfiger come to you, and become the creative director and put your mark on that. And don't worry about the end of that, because you're going to go on and do the next thing and the next thing.
So Kenneth, are you seeing that happening for designers specifically off of Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram for sure. Like, I follow some really popping pages that are like, these are young designers that are making some things that, like, frankly, I as a 43-year-old might not wear, but I see that they're like on the edge. And these kids are wearing the hottest stuff. That's streetwear at its finest, right? It's not like, we never tried to appeal to the masses. Like, we tried to build something that like spoke to us and our culture, which was subculture almost. It was like, we're not even trying to do what you're doing. So like, when one designer goes this way, we go that way, right?
When they go low, we go high.
Yeah, right. Or like, if skinny jeans are popping, we're gonna go back to the baggiest fit. Like, whatever it is, it's like, That's what streetwear is about. That's what the subculture is about. So as long as these young kids have their finger on that pulse, they shouldn't be threatened. Like they should know that like they're the next. The problem is that they need money, they need validation, they need that because they want to know that the art that they're creating is right. That's the hardest part for an artist, is to go back to your studio and create and be like, man, nobody's seen this yet. I know how dope this is, but nobody's seen it. Like, so Instagram is giving designers that opportunity. It's like, I just made something and I'll put it out, and then like somebody can walk down the street during Fashion Week and you're like, damn, what is that? Yeah. You know? And there are some kids out there, photographers that are they're capturing this. Like they know. And then you're like, man, what is that? And the next year, they're on the runway. It's that fast. Like, you know, and we see it happen with Virgil, you know, like from Pyrex to Off-White to Louis Vuitton to IKEA to Avion, like whatever. He's putting his stamp on everything. Yeah. You know, so like this is the time, and the creative people, they have that power, but they have to believe in themselves, right? And they have to get other people to believe in themselves, which is hard.
So I hope you guys enjoyed the first part as much as I did. And really want you guys to check out the second part, because Kenneth and I really get into more conversations around the strategy and the techniques to apply in building that infrastructure for designers and creators to go direct to consumer. Again, check out millennialmadetrillionaire.com. We have the live episode there, and also we have some of the notes for you guys to pull. And again, we have the full episode on YouTube, so all you have to do is type in Millennial Made Trillionaire and you can see each part of the interview. And I'm honestly trying to figure out a better way to connect with you guys, because right now I am on an island not knowing who I'm communicating with, and yeah, it's not cool. So if you go on to the Millennial Made Trillionaire website, you can share your email address directly with me, and I can connect with you because I want to start a newsletter so that I can provide more information and also hear what you guys think. And yeah, so now that we have all that out the way, let's jump to the next part of this episode.